Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take some fascinating source material today. It's a pretty unique YouTube video, and we really try to, well, unpack it for you.
Yeah, our goal is basically to pull out the key insights, the main takeaways, so you get the core knowledge without wading through everything yourself.
Exactly. Hopefully spark some, aha moments too. Today, we're diving into the world of mantras.
But through a very specific, maybe unusual lens, this video features a hypno-operator and someone they call telepathic support.
Right. It's not your typical academic study. The setup itself is interesting. There's this protocol of questions, then some free exploration.
And crucially, the support person, Florence, apparently didn't know the topic mantras beforehand. The idea was to get, unfiltered hypnotic perception.
To avoid leading the witness, so to speak. So our mission here is to sift through what came out in that session. What did they observe about mantras, their effects, potential upsides, maybe some dangers mentioned?
It definitely promises some, let's say, different perspectives.
Okay, let's dive in. So Florence is in this hypnotic state, encountering mantras. What were those first impressions like? What stood out?
Well, the first thing that grabbed me was her visual description of the letters. She wasn't just seeing symbols on a page.
No.
No, she described seeing writings, or maybe drawings, she said, above and below each letter, like codes.
Wow.
Yeah, with specific traits and points. It immediately suggests, maybe these aren't just sounds, but have some kind of deeper structure. Encoded information, perhaps.
Like a hidden layer right there in the shape of the letters.
Yeah.
That's intriguing. And didn't she also talk about depth?
Yes, that was fascinating too. A sense of depth within the letters. She used words like fractal, accordion effect, even like entering a cave.
So a very multi-sensory thing happening, not just seeing, but almost feeling a space inside the letters.
Exactly. It suggests that on whatever level she was accessing, mantras aren't just sound. They have visual, maybe even tactile qualities.
Okay, so visual's depth.
Yeah.
What about the sound itself? What did she experience auditorily?
That was quite varied too. Some mantras felt dull, like they absorbed sound. Others were really resonant, almost painfully. So she mentioned head pain, like cymbals crashing. Yeah. And then there were others that were soft, gentle, didn't seem to penetrate the body much.
And she started connecting colors to these vibrations, right?
Dark colors for the dull ones, white for the gentle sounds, and interestingly, gold or metallic colors for those really resonant, maybe jarring ones.
Well, it's almost like her subconscious was translating energy signatures into visuals.
Yeah.
What do you think that suggests? Different frequencies, maybe?
Could be. Or maybe different emotional tones tied to the mantras. It points to mantras interacting with us on multiple levels at once: sound, sight, maybe even feeling.
Okay, so that's the initial sensory input. The video then moves into effects, specifically on the mental body. How was that described?
Florence likened mantra recitation to building a brick wall.
A brick wall in the mind.
Yeah, in the mental body. Each repetition adds a brick, gradually filling the space, potentially crowding out other thoughts. So for you listening, picture that repetition building a mental construct.
Which aligns with, the traditional use of mantras for focus in meditation, quieting the noise.
Right. But it also raises a question, doesn't it? Could that wall become, restrictive? Too solid?
Good point. Mental rigidity, maybe. Okay, then they shift focus to the energetic bodies. What happened there?
Initially, she perceived these energetic layers, the subtle bodies some traditions talk about beyond the physical as being quite fluid, interconnected.
Right.
But when a mantra was recited, she sensed a change. They started to separate, become more defined, distinct layers.
So the mantra acted like a structuring agent on these subtle energies, making the boundaries clearer.
That's how it sounds, yeah. Could relate to ideas of energetic alignment, maybe, or just defining different aspects of our being.
Yeah, they did focus on some specific mantras. The sound home seemed particularly powerful.
It really stood out. Florence got shivers from it. She described it as elevating and amplifying all the energetic bodies.
Just that one sound. Wow.
Yeah, suggests a very fundamental resonance, maybe. The shivers point to a strong energetic reaction.
And the video mentions something about grounding, connecting to information within yourself, but only if you're ready.
What does ready mean in that context, though? That's the interesting part. Is it about openness, resonance with that specific sound?
It implies it's not automatic, right?
Yeah.
You need some kind of alignment or receptivity within yourself for the mantra to have its full effect.
Seems that way.
Okay, but then the conversation pivots a bit. towards potential downsides or dangers.
Yeah, this is where it gets more complex. The idea came up that some mantras might act as links.
Links to what?
To draw energy into something called an egregore.
The egregore concept.
Yeah.
For listeners, that's often described as a kind of collective energy field built by a group's shared thoughts and intentions.
Exactly. And the video presented this striking image. Tibetan monks reciting mantras, and their energy seems to be flowing out of them, feeding this egregore. Florence described it as not normal.
So it raises questions about group practices. Is the energy generated always beneficial for the individual? Or is it mainly feeding the collective field?
Potentially an imbalance, yeah. The group entity drawing more than it gives back, perhaps.
And this connects to effects on the subliminal self, too. What was happening there?
It seemed like mantra recitation could make the subliminal self kind of drowsy, lulled, hindering conscious awareness, maybe.
Drowsy, that's an odd description.
Isn't it? And some mantras apparently created a feeling of intoxication for the subliminal self, but it dissipated when the chanting stopped.
Like a temporary altered state on that deeper level.
But home, that powerful mantra, didn't seem to do that. It stayed more on the physical and etheric planes, apparently.
So different mantras, different effects on different layers of our being. It's getting layered.
Yeah.
What about people who just plain don't believe in this stuff? If someone recites a mantra thinking it's nonsense, what happens according to this source?
Well, Florence observed that for a non-believer, the sound might enter the physical body, but nothing much happens energetically. No real effect.
Okay, so disbelief is a shield.
Seems like it. However, if someone is just open to the possibility, not a full believer, but open, she saw sparks entering their body.
Sparks?
Yeah, leading to maybe some relaxation, but primarily just on the physical level initially, not really touching the etheric body right away.
Interesting. So even just a little openness makes a difference, allow something in, even if it's just a physical sensation?
Belief, or at least willingness, seems to be a key factor.
Right. Okay, that brings us to the free exploration part of the video. Deeper insights start coming through. What emerged there?
One thing was about the repetition itself, how it leads to this automatism.
Like going on autopilot.
Yeah, and the suggestion was that this automatic state, bypassing conscious thought, could create an opening.
An opening? For what?
For what the source describes as external entities.
Whoa. Okay, that adds a whole other layer. Entities.
It gets pretty metaphysical here. Around the 30th repetition of one mantra, Florence observed, on this subtle level, multiple entities actually entering the room.
Entering the room. And the mantras were calling them.
That was the perception, yes. That the mantras themselves acted as a call, an invitation to these entities. Raises some big questions, obviously.
Yeah, like what exactly are you inviting in when you chant? And they also mentioned mantras creating an illusion or sweetening effect.
Yes, and that this illusion could somehow isolate the subliminal self from the physical body.
Sounds dissociative, potentially.
That's one way to interpret it. A separation, maybe masking a deeper energetic shift, like feeling good on the surface while something else is happening underneath.
But belief is still key, right?
Yeah.
Even if entities are called, they can't fully engage unless the person believes.
Exactly. Belief and intention were called the open door. So our own inner state is the moderator, the filter.
It gives us agency, at least.
It seems so. Our consciousness acts as a boundary.
And for the non-believer in that scenario, when they stop chanting,
the entities leave, apparently. The person goes back to their previous state. No lasting harm in that instance.
But for the believer?
For the believer, that veil, that separation between the physical and subliminal, might actually persist even after they stop.
So belief can create more lasting energetic changes. Wow.
It implies our beliefs really do shape our subtle reality.
Okay, circling back to home, it resonates in mental, emotional, sexual bodies. But then there's this energy drain point again.
Yes, a significant point. The suggestion is that sexual energy specifically is heavily affected by home.
Affected how?
It seems to be channeled away, used to feed egregores, specifically an egregore of home.
An egregore of home. So the energy isn't staying with the individual.
Doesn't sound like it, according to the source. Raises questions about the energetic cost, you know?
Definitely. And what about chanting a sequence of mantras, not just one?
That had its own description, like creating a phrase that subtly drains the mental body, constricts the emotional body, described like a serpent squeezing it. And each word entering the sexual body feeds on its energy. It's a very vivid, somewhat unsettling picture.
Like a coordinated energy drain across multiple systems. The serpent image is quite potent.
And that brick wall in the mental body we talked about earlier, it gets linked here to a drug-like state.
Drug-like?
Yeah, potentially disconnecting the person from their reality, projecting them into an illusion, altering consciousness significantly.
So maybe not just focus, but potentially dissociation.
That seems to be the implication, if not practiced mindfully, or depending on the mantra.
Now, what about people using mantras specifically to boost sexual energy? Some traditions aim for that, right?
Yes, but the video suggests that any bubbling sensation they feel might be an illusion.
Illusion, so they feel powerful, but...
But their actual energy is being diverted elsewhere, according to Florence's perception. The motivation behind it is seen as trying to draw power from outside oneself.
So how does this illusion work then? They feel something, but the energy's going somewhere else.
It's described as just a sensation of power. The actual energy is supposedly being siphoned off, connected to egregores via this energetic serpent.
A serpent made of
The energetic connection between all the individuals reciting those mantras. And the more people chant, the stronger this serpent, this connection, allegedly becomes.
That is a very specific and unusual model of collective energy dynamics.
Extremely specific. It really presents a unique view of how these practices might function on a subtle level with potential unintended consequences.
Okay, strap in, because the video then takes a hard turn into history, or at least a purported past timeline.
Yes, this is where it gets really unconventional. An origin story for mantras set around 1800, Tibet.
Lay it out for us. What did Florence see?
A scene in a Tibetan temple. There's this large central figure, bare-chested loincloth, exuding what she called a malicious energy.
Malicious?
And described as having 100% reptilian DNA, apparently, with blue eyes that could shift to look like a viper's.
Reptilian DNA?
Right.
And others were there?
Yes, 6 humans, kneeling, heads down, forbidden to look, described as enslaved, not reptilian themselves.
And this central figure?
Initiates them into repeating words mantras, the stated purpose, to maintain control, dissociate them from their own thinking.
Control through repetition. And those codes, the traits and points on the letters she saw earlier.
They were apparently present back then too, facilitating the connection between the words and specific entities, described as encoded programs like constellations.
So the very structure of the words was designed for this connection.
That's the claim. And the depth in the letters, linked to dimensional shifts. A way to absorb energy from people unaware, guided by this reptilian figure.
What was the effect on the humans?
The subliminal self supposedly became tiny, detached. The physical body withered. A picture of total energetic drain and control.
Grim. And there was a ceremony scene too.
The humans, heads still bowed, walking and reciting, but now with music gongs, bells. This combo supposedly caused even more dissociation, made them feel like puppets, even if it looked like a celebration.
Wow. Okay. That's quite an origin story presented there. Very specific, very unsettling.
It absolutely is. A unique and admittedly highly unusual explanation for the perceived power and potential pitfalls of mantras, according to this source.
So after that dive into the deep past, the video comes back to non-believers, but with a twist.
Yeah, it suggests that even if someone doesn't consciously believe in mantras, if they come from a religious background with lots of repetition, Catholicism was mentioned as an example.
Okay.
They might actually be more susceptible to mantra effects.
More susceptible. How so?
The idea is that there's a pre-existing prepared ground, a history of maybe submission to authority, unquestioning repetition. This could make them unconsciously more open.
Like the pattern of repetition itself creates an energetic pathway, regardless of the specific words or conscious belief.
That seems to be the suggestion. An energetic resonance with the act of repetition. And they noted similar things in other religions with repetitive practices.
Fascinating. Okay, one last observation mentioned. A group trance state.
Yeah, a group of men swaying, chanting, praise to God, repeatedly. Florence perceived their subliminal part detaching.
Detaching. Like an out-of-body thing?
Kind of. They could observe the group from above, but while their subliminal self was detached, their physical bodies kept swaying and chanting.
How did the bodies keep going?
Held together by the group's proximity, the tight egregore they were forming, but the detached subliminal part was described as being drowned in mud.
Drowned in mud. That doesn't sound good. Suggests disconnection, entanglement.
And the interpretation was that this ritual made the group feel powerful. They believed they were drawing power from some external source described as pulpy above them.
But was it real power?
The video suggests no. They might experience phenomena like not falling over while swaying, but internally, their own energy was being depleted. Another illusion of power.
And this is a decent-sized group.
About 50 people, reportedly. Really emphasizes that theme of collective energy fields and potentially misunderstood dynamics.
And just to clarify, throughout all this, Florence, the telepathic support, was supposedly transmitting these observations back to the group involved in the video.
Yes, telepathically. The idea presented was that the information already exists on a subtle level, and her transmission could act as an accelerator for their awareness.
Whether they consciously grasp it all then or not.
Exactly, a flow of information on energetic levels.
All right, so let's try to wrap this up. We've journeyed through a really unique, sometimes bizarre, perspective on mantras from this one YouTube source.
Definitely unique. From the initial sensory stuff, the letters having depth, the colors.
Yeah, to the effects on mental and energetic bodies, that whole brick wall idea, the separation of layers.
Then the specific power of home, but also the warnings about energy drain, egregores.
And that whole thing with entities, belief being the open door, the potential for illusion.
Not to mention the very unconventional origin story involving reptilian beings and control.
Can't forget that bit. And the observations about group trances and energy depletion, even when feeling powerful.
It's certainly a source that offers a very specific and maybe challenging viewpoint on repetition, intention, and subtle energy.
Absolutely. The themes of energy manipulation, the power of belief for good or ill, seemingly, and these unseen influences, they're definitely food for thought.
Regardless of how you take the more out there claims, those core themes are worth pondering.
For sure. Which leaves you, our listener, with a final thought to mull over. Taking these observations, however strange they might seem, what might they suggest about practices involving repetition and intention in your own life?
Are there unseen energies or dynamics at play that maybe you haven't considered? What might you want to explore further, prompted by these rather startling insights?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.